One question I want you to think about real quick is how often do you look at the cover art of your games? I mean, like truly looking at them, not just glancing at them. For this question, I'm not talking about multiplayer games, say Apex or Call of Duty, that change their logos whenever there's new content to keep it looking fresh. I mean, like single player games. Cover art is used to entice and inform the player what the game is. Some games do this in secretive ways, like Heavy Rain, which has a piece of origami on the cover, which doesn't tell the player much at first. But other games, mainly first-person shooters, have the main protagonist on the front cover. The reason I bring this up is that Far Cry does things differently. The main character is nowhere to be seen on these covers. Now, this isn't some monumental discovery. Anyone who's played a Far Cry game knows Ubisoft loves to market the villains of their game more than anything. Even in the most recent entry, Far Cry 6, with the trailer only showing the villain, whereas the protagonist is not shown at all. Now, this isn't for every Far Cry game, but at least for the games we're going to be discussing today, that being Far Cry 3, 4, and 5, this fits. Something else to look at is the de-evolution of our protagonist. Far Cry 3 and 4 have named protagonists with an interesting backstory and reasons for being in the situations they're in, but with Far Cry 5, not only do we not have a name, only going by Rook or Deputy, we don't speak. And there isn't even a set look to our protagonist, as this game offers major customization in the form of outfits and the ability to change our gender, something not present in the past games. It's not wrong to assume it may be the same with Far Cry 6, since going off the description of the game, it looks like we're going to be playing a person named Danny Rojas, a local resident of the island the game takes place in. Fighting against Anton Castillo, our presumed to be main villain. We aren't someone special, we're just one of the thousands of people on the island that decided to take larger steps towards their goal, or at least that's what it looks like. Case in point, Ubisoft seems to have put more time on their villains and less time on the protagonist, which isn't a bad thing at all, and I think due to this decision they made the villains more likable and more compelling than they actually should have been. Most games tell a story about the protagonist, where we are playing as them in their story, but with some Far Cry games, mainly Far Cry 5, it always felt like we were just the person present in the villain's story, not them present in ours. But that previous point is what I want to discuss today. Why are these villains so fantastic, so likable that you want more screen time with them, even if it's just for a few short moments? You just want to see and engage with them more as they're just that entertaining. Well, let's talk about it. So not only does Ubisoft have a common trend of keeping the main villain on the cover, they also keep the trend of introducing them in a sinister way with the intro. We'll cover each of the villains individually in a bit, but I want to talk about their introductions to their respective games as a whole first. Starting this off though with Far Cry 3, we play as a man named Jason Brody, your typical white American kid from LA. No care in the world, with his only focus being on what he's gonna drink next. We get a nice montage of him and his friends partying on the island with certain freeze frames to introduce the characters. The beginning text before all of this, however, is a quote from Alice in Wonderland. There will be many quotes like this throughout the game, which I always felt was a reference to Jason beginning his new life. Being a part of the island tribe and doing things the islanders do is something Jason has never experienced, and as we know from playing the game, he's a totally different person by the end of it. The person that would ignite this new life in Jason is Voss. Voss is the first antagonist of the game and is a clear psychopath. Voss is also the leader of the Pirates, a local group that kidnaps and ransoms people for easy money. The main reason Voss is so likable is because he's funny. From the early moments of the game, he always does something evil, then follows it up with something witty.
I rule this fucking kingdom. Shut the fuck up, or you die. What is it, Jason? Jason, what is it? Why aren't you laughing now like you did up there? What, is this not fun anymore? Have I failed to entertain you?
It's clear he loves to toy with his victims, especially Jason. Voss knows that he's in control of us at all times, and he can toy with us as much as he likes. Even though there's no actual camera being pointed at him, it always felt that he owns the spotlight whenever he's on screen, making sure he's the one everyone looks at, no matter where he is.
I just hope that you two pieces of fox are more entertaining than your friends. Ta-ta. Bye-bye. Get you every fucking time, man.
Another good example of this is during our escape. Every time I played, instead of continuing on ahead and progressing the narrative, I always stop and watch Voss shoot these prisoners just for the ending comment.
Damn, they just got you killed. Oh my god, did you realize I just shot them all in sequence? One after the other. I did not do it on purpose. If you answer the small questions in life, leads you to the bigger. Can you clean this fucking shit up?
Even though he's off the beaten path in the background, he still owns that spotlight we mentioned. After attempting to escape, we see Voss toy with us even more as he catches us once again, but still gives us the chance to run away and escape, knowing that we probably won't make it far anyway. Far Cry 4, at least to me, is considered the odd one out of the three. Far Cry 4's protagonist is Ajay Ghale. The reason it's the odd one out is that our protagonist has actual relations to the antagonist. Ajay Ghale's main objective was to spread his mother's ashes next to Lakshmana. It's not as simple as it seems though, as the country is currently in the midst of a civil war. We're being transported via bus until it's stopped by the country's dictatorial force, the Royal Army. An argument ensues and the bus is shot up. Thankfully, we were not shot, but we are taken out of the bus at gunpoint. Pagan Min, the leader of the group, arrives and isn't quite happy with the situation.
Stop the bus. Yes, stop the bus. Not shoot the bus. I'm very particular with my words. Stop. Shoot. Stop. Shoot.
Pagan is quite like Voss, a little psychotic but also a little comedic, killing his guard over one mistake but then getting mad he got his expensive shoes bloody. What separates him from Voss, however, is he's quite soft-spoken. It's clear that he doesn't consider Ajay an enemy and is quite compassionate as well, as he apologizes for the current situation, then takes a photo to commemorate the moment. Ajay, however, is less than happy, as would anyone who just saw someone get stabbed to death with a pen. Afterward, Pagan Min invites us to his palace, where we see him offer us some delicious crab rangoon. At the table is Pagan, his associate Paul, and Darpin. It's found out that Pagan knew who Ashwari was, but at this time we don't exactly know the full story yet. Pagan is not an evil person, so to speak. He is, and there's definitely many examples to prove this, but as long as you're nice to him, he will help you and meet your expectations. When he leaves, he says sit down and enjoy the food and he'll be right back. If you take him at his literal word, after about 15 minutes or so, he'll come back and actually take you to Lakshmana like you wanted, which as we discover is not a place, but a person. Ajay's father Mohan was the leader of the Golden Path. His mother Ashwari wanted to fight alongside him, but Mohan deemed her unsuitable to do so. Mohan instead sent her to be a spy, but instead of spying on Pagan, she fell in love with him. The two then had a girl named Lakshmana, who at the age of 1 was killed by Mohan. Ishwari would kill Mohan for it and leave Kirat to live in the United States. This would make Pagan our stepdad. This also explains why his compassionate side comes out when we talk with him. We're related to him, and he treats his family well, whether they're biological or not. Of course, to progress, we can't do this ending, so we escape the palace and help the Golden Path. For Far Cry 5, we start very similarly to Far Cry 3, watching a slideshow of videos, except this is inside footage on the Cult of Eden's Gate. Someone tried to capture footage of the cult, but was found out and killed in front of the church. We pan out and see fellow officers with us in a helicopter. We can tell from the early moments of the game that Joseph Seed is going to be very different from the other villains in this series. The sheriff constantly brings up to the marshal that there's no shame in backing out of this operation, even saying that Joseph terrifies him. As we walk the compound, we see all the cultist members surrounding us, and they clearly aren't happy we're here. Even in the church when we meet Joseph, the cult members block our path, protecting him from us. We can see the immense power that he has. Simply by speaking, he can calm the entire situation down. He also speaks very softly, just like Pagan, so much so that when he does get angry at certain points later in the game, it's a lot scarier than it should be normally. After the cult leaves, Joseph, with his family behind him, presents his hands, offering himself up to be arrested, saying not to worry and that God won't let us take him. Where after we do arrest him, we hear him say the words, "Sometimes the best thing to do is walk away," in reference to the future events of the game. Another reference to the future events of the game is right before we cuff him.
And I saw, and behold, it was a white horse, and hell followed with him.
The white horse, while in the context of his sentence actually means a white horse, he was using the sentence to also refer to Sheriff Whitehorse as well, especially putting emphasis on that last sentence, hell followed with him, while directly looking at us, meaning we are Joseph's hell and he has to stop us. This game, like Far Cry 4, also has a secret ending, where after 5 minutes or so, we leave and don't arrest Joseph. The marshal is very confused and against this, but the sheriff knows we shouldn't do this now. 4 people against dozens arresting the leader of a cult in his own compound can't really go right at all, and it definitely doesn't as we see the outcome of our actions. The cult is so committed to saving Joseph that they will climb a moving helicopter, and one even jumped into the blades, causing it to crash. We then see one of the more intimidating scenes of the game where we see Joseph speak to dispatch only to find out that she was working with him the whole time. When we awake, Joseph talks to his followers and calls for the reaping and attempts to grab everyone from the helicopter, but we manage to escape and start our long journey attempting to stop the family. The intros of Far Cry are made purposely to convey the sort of power and motivation each antagonist has. Voss is driven by money and power. He wants to make his captives feel powerless while also making money off them too. Pagan has a vast amount of wealth, enough to supply his own army, but has been at war with the Golden Path for quite some time, so he's trying to eradicate them. And Joseph, and by extension the rest of the Seed family, are a persuasive group able to get their people to do their bidding simply by asking. Ubisoft structured these intros this way for a reason. Within the first 10 to 20 minutes of the intro, we get an introduction of our protagonist and our antagonist, as well as the motivations for their immoral acts and goals, and why we the hero are tied to that motivation or goal of theirs. Jason, Ajay, and the deputy have to battle through tons of enemies to complete their goals. They are 1 against 1,000. This makes the protagonist feel powerless, which I'll get to why this is super important at the end of the video, but these villains wouldn't be as good without us. By definition, an antagonist cannot exist without a protagonist. The reason this person in the story is considered the villain or antagonist is that they either have goals that conflict with the hero's goal, like in Far Cry 3, or both have the same goal but one needs to beat the other to it, like in Far Cry 5. Jason wants to escape the island with his friends, Voss won't let him do that. Simple as that, is there's a conflict. And both the deputy and Joseph want to save the people of the county. Both their ways of saving people are drastically different from one another, and both can have their way. One has to win, one has to lose. Yes, the antagonist is the bad guys of the story, but it's the protagonists that continue to push them throughout the story, making them appear more on screen and doing more sinister acts. To reinforce this, I think it's about time we finally delve into the games individually, starting with Far Cry 3. As stated before, Jason is new to everything this island has to offer. When Jason kills his first pirate, his hands tremble. He hasn't done something like this before. I always thought it was a weird gameplay gimmick at first, but now I've come to actually appreciate the metaphor of the tatau, showing not just our skills evolving, but our mentality. At the beginning of the game, we weren't accustomed to climbing towers and raiding outposts. Most time we would be detected, but as we grew, our tatau evolved, showing that we too have evolved, and now sneaking through an outpost undetected is a breeze. This evolution also happened in Jason himself, becoming more familiar with hunting animals and using unique types of weaponry. In the game, we can uncover that Jason was skilled in firearms somewhat thanks to his brother Grant, who served in the army, but Jason never actually killed someone. Shooting guns and taking someone's life are two completely different things. Jason was becoming more and more like a killer. He was turning into Voss. When we encounter Voss at the end of the game and start the weird dream sequence, he says very clearly, "I am you and you are me." Even as we walk the path, Citra asks us, what kind of man are we? Getting Jason to question what he wants to be and what his true purpose is. Throughout the game, Jason rescues his friends, and every time he returns, he sounds more and more desperate to stay, even at one point outright saying he doesn't want to leave. You could pass this off as maybe he really likes hanging out with the Rocky Odd people, but what have we been doing for 95% of the game? It's definitely not been playing cards, it's killing pirates. Jason's bloodlust has grown. He loves killing. He even says, quote, "You know, I never thought I'd be able to kill somebody. The first time it felt wrong, but now it feels like winning." Throughout the flashback dream scenes, we see Voss, then Jason appear, but then Voss, then Jason again. It's the game trying to tell us that Jason is turning into the new Voss, this crazed killer. Jason's friends are even starting to notice this, as when we rescue Oliver, Lisa pulls Jason over and says that this is affecting him too much. She's worried that the guns and tattoos we have are affecting our minds. Later in the game, after killing Voss and completing Citra's trial, becoming the new true Rocky Out warrior, Jason meets with the group one more time and says he's not coming. The whole time he wanted to leave the island with his friends, but now he wants to stay. It's because he's finally figured out what he wants to do in his life. Voss is also driving Jason insane at the exact same time, especially with his infamous insanity line, where we're doing the same thing over and over again expecting something to change. What he's saying isn't too far from the truth. Jason gets captured by Voss, he escapes, he attempts to rescue his friends, but then he's captured again. It happens 3 times throughout the game, and Jason thinks something will change. Now obviously we do end up killing Voss, so in a way we do change the outcome, but regardless it's something interesting to think about. Each time the same thing happens. He's captured, then he escapes. It's actual insanity. My favorite scene of Voss has gotta be before this, however, when we rescue Lisa. Voss gets quite down to earth with us, talking about his sister Citra, and I'll just play a small clip at the end real quick.
There was a time where I'd do anything for my sister. You know, first time I ever killed was for my sister. It was not enough for her. No, please. You see, the thing about our loved ones, right? Our fucking loved ones! They come and they blindside you every fucking time. So they say to me, they say, Boss, who the fuck is it going to be? Them or me? Me or them? you know, like they fucking think that I need to make a fucking choice.
Voss for the first time is talking about his emotions, the real reason for his hatred of Citra. That's what opened my eyes to Voss. He's chaotic and insane, but he's being real at the same time. Taking into account the ending of the game and everything with Citra, it really makes you think about Voss and if he's actually the insane one. Citra at a young age forced Voss to kill people for her. She was demanding then and she's still a demanding person now. At the end of the game, if we decide to kill Lisa and join Citra, we have sex with her as a final reward and she kills Jason in a ritualistic fashion. She wants Jason to impregnate her so that she can bear the perfect child who will be the face of the Rakyat. Citra throughout the game, even way before the ending, constantly enabled Jason's bloodlust, saying that he would make a fine warrior and that it's okay to be this way. After taking a look at everything that Citra and Voss have done, it starts to make you question both of them. Is Voss really not as insane as we thought, or maybe they're both deranged and need to be left alone? It's extremely thought-provoking and why I love this scene so much. Voss in Far Cry 3 to an extent is my favorite entry in the series. It makes you think about all the craziness that occurred on our journey and how much one small thing can change a person, going from a kid to a killer. And it's Voss that amplifies this in Jason, and he's the reason Jason's in this mess. He captured him and killed his brother, so it only makes sense to blame Voss for the downfall of Jason's insanity. There is a bright side to this, however, as if we do choose to help our friends, Jason does acknowledge the darkness inside of him, but he knows he's better than that and won't succumb to it, which is quite a good ending. Just like with the previous entry, to explain Pagan, we have to talk about Ajay. Ajay's not as naive as Jason is, but he's definitely quite naive when it comes to the Golden Path, and he's also quite dismissive of them at times as well. Ajay even says that he's thankful for the Golden Path, but all he wants to do is scatter his mom's ashes. It's not that he doesn't care for them at all, but it's definitely not a large priority of his. His mom purposely withheld this information from him so that he doesn't have to learn the sinister things his father did, like killing his stepsister Lakshmana. As for Pagan, he was quite powerful and wealthy early on in his life. He owned a small cartel in China, but as he grew more powerful, he realized his death was inevitably going to happen, so he escaped to Kyrat to live out his days. Pagan arrived during the Civil War, and once it was about to end, he killed the heir to the throne and became the new leader of Kyrat. Pagan sadly doesn't show up much in the game as much as Voss does, but I believe this is because the game is using Pagan to showcase really what's happening with Amita and Sabal in all of our choices. From the moment we are saved, we're thrown into the Golden Path, whether we like it or not. Amita says it's possible that we were sent back to Kyrat for something even greater, and that if we help the Golden Path, we can spread Ishwari's ashes. We have no choice but to kill the royal army. Pagan even brings this up at the end of the game.
To whom am I speaking? The son who returned to scatter his mother's ashes, or the lunatic who has murdered his way to the top of my mountain?
It makes us question ourselves and who we even are anymore. You're then given two options: kill or spare Pagan. Killing him would prove his point, that we're just someone who murdered a bunch of people to get to the top of his mountain. But by showing restraint, we prove that we are the same Ajay who came to this country with his original goal in mind. Pagan is very honest with the people he speaks to. Give him respect and he'll provide it back. If we killed him, we wouldn't have learned what he tells us at the end of the game. By sitting down and eating, he explains that if we just sat at the table in the beginning, that none of this would have happened. He would have helped spread Ishwari's ashes and he would have been given Kyrat, which is a shocking revelation. Kyrat was always going to be Ajay's. Pagan purposely stopped the bus in the beginning of the intro so he could pass down leadership of the country to him. As we walk out, Pagan says that once we spread those ashes, pre-Kyrat Ajay is gone and stays with the urn. So that begs the question, what happens next?
I simply continued where she left off. I killed so many people for them. But then I realized I was only using Lakshmana's death as an excuse to do whatever I wanted to do. Just as you use those ashes as an excuse to do whatever you want to do.
This, and I mean this in no exaggeration, has got to be one of the best lines in the game, arguably the entire series. Pagan used the death of his daughter to kill thousands of people, just like we used our goal of spreading our mom's ashes to justify joining the Golden Path and killing thousands, and it's completely true. We never questioned anything we did. All the soldiers we killed, the decisions we made, we did all of these as we thought it was necessary to complete our goal, when it never needed to happen. The secret ending shows this simply by waiting. Pagan would have let us spread Ishwari's ashes, and then we could either have been the king of Kyrat or go home, done and over with in 20 minutes. It was shocking to hear that he wasn't just saying that to Ajay, he was talking to us too, the player. We are Ajay, not only because we control him, but our motivations and our actions. Every decision we made was so that we could help spread Ishwari's ashes. We used it as an excuse. We climbed those towers to show more of the map. This revealed more outposts. Destroying those outposts gave us free guns and money, things we could use to defeat the royal army. We did these things to become stronger so that we could defeat Pagan and get to the location Ishwari wanted us to go, when this never needed to happen in the first place. Pagan, in one sentence, changed my whole thinking about this game. Truly one of the best antagonists this series has. He had me rethinking all the stuff we did for Kyrat. At the ending of the game, before meeting Pagan, you decide who leads the Golden Path. Both Amita and Sabal are terrible leaders, with outlandish ideas for the future of this country, just like Mohan. Sabal wants to stick to the old ways of the Golden Path, Kyrat, and the religious ideals of the country, but Amita wants to break away from tradition and start a new outlook for the country, but the way they go about doing these is awful. Amita would turn Kyrat into a drug state, and Sabal would use religion as a reason to justify his acts, whether they're good or bad, and we have to choose who we side with. Because of our original actions of leaving the palace, we got swept up in a tidal wave of terrible decisions that we had no choice but to make. But at the end of all of this, we got to spread her ashes, so we had to make those decisions, right? I'm not so sure anymore. Far Cry 5 is a little different. Our character, the deputy, doesn't speak, so we really don't get to understand him as much as a character, but we can still uncover lots about Joseph and the Seed family. Far Cry 5 decided to take a leap and introduce 4 villains instead of 1, all of whom have their reasons for existing in the game's world. Joseph, John, and Jacob are brothers, with Faith being the adopted sister, as from some dialogue in the game you can find out that her real name is Rachel Jessup. Joseph from birth was living a rough life. He was a squatter near some abandoned plant and ended up bellhopping at a nearby hotel to make ends meet. He became entranced by religion and hoped to hear more of the voice, as he calls it, which we can assume is God. Joseph would eventually hear the voice for a final time in a dream of his, showing a vision of darkness and punishment, which he called the Collapse. He recruited his 2 brothers, Jacob and John, to help with his vision. He was told to make sure his followers were kept safe from the imminent doom of the world. Joseph is quite sadistic in these actions. At one point in the game, he tells us how his wife and daughter were in a car accident. His wife died, but his daughter was still alive. This was around the time when God would tell him about the end of the world, so in an effort to prove his worthiness, he pinched the tube connected to his daughter's face, killing her. With Voss, he was crazy but comedic. Pagan was also the same, but he made us question our journey. Joseph, at least to me, kind of resembles a bit of both of them. The crazy psychotic side, where Voss killed people because he wanted to, Joseph did it in the name of God. And with Pagan, making us question our beliefs and if our journey was truly worth it, while also not wanting to kill Ajay. Joseph doesn't want to kill the deputy, even though at the end of the game when we confront him, he says that he should have, but he restrains from doing so. It's only until we attack first that he attempts to take our life. At the end of the game, we're then given 2 options, resist or walk away. If you choose the resist option, at the end of the fight, he will say a verse from Luke 23:34. Forgive them, Father, they do not know what they do. He's telling God to forgive us as we don't understand the repercussions of our actions, that being the collapse. If we leave, then he says the verse from Luke 6:37, saying, Judge not lest you be judged, Condemn not lest you be condemned, forgive and you will be forgiven. Joseph is forgiving our actions. Because we walked away, this choice was our last forgiveness. If we had chosen resist, he has no choice but to retaliate, but since we didn't, he's forgiving us. Joseph isn't letting this power get to his head, however. Not only is he quite calm in his decision making, but also understands he has sins too, just like everyone else in the world. This is shown in his scarring of the words greed, gluttony, lust, pride, and sloth on his body. Joseph also isn't the only member of the family. As stated previously, there's 3 other people involved in this family. Jacob is the cult recruiter, John is the lawyer and secondary spokesperson, while Faith serves as a voice of the cult as well as controlling them. Although in some way they do end up brainwashing the cult together. Faith uses her bliss flowers, Jacob uses mind control with the help of his music box, and John frequently baptizes people in bliss-covered waters. For Jacob, he always projects to the people that the lives of the few outweigh the lives of the many, which is quite opposite from the traditional quote, saying that the lives of the cult and the family are more important than the rest of the non-believers. Jacob also says that he culls the herd. When he switches up the wording sometimes, he also says cull the weak. Jacob gets rid of the weak by doing his brainwashing test so that the cult can have perfect soldiers. Jacob during our capture explains that during the war he was stranded in the desert with no water or food. As a last resort, he killed the native squad mate Miller so that he could survive. A later medical report that he received later deduced that he was suffering from PTSD. He later became homeless and out of money due to this and was then recruited by Joseph. John has always been about saying yes. It's everywhere in his bunker and you can hear him say it tons of times. When he was younger, he was beaten by his parents until all he could say was yes. He used this as his motto for the rest of his life. So John has some serious childhood trauma that Joseph exploited, making it easier for John to follow him. Joseph even said in game that John as a child was kind and loving, which made him an easy target for abuse and exploitation. The reason John carries this specific motto of yes with him is because when you just accept things into your life and not question it, your mind is much more at peace. No more stress and anxiety about life and its outcomes, just pure bliss. Speaking of bliss, we have Faith, our last member of the family, and the adopted one. Tracy later in the game says that she knew Faith before all this happened. Faith, or who was originally known as Rachel, was a girl who suffered from lots of abuse and turned to drugs for comfort. Joseph was able to comfort and help her with this, and she was actually able to recover from her addiction, except during her boss fight she says something quite different.
You think I wanted this? He plied me with drugs, he threatened me. I was 17. I was just a child.
He kept her addiction going, and she was a child. It's quite heartbreaking to say the least. If you're noticing a trend, then you're correct. Joseph preyed upon impressionable people, including his own family, also that he could further his cause. He's very manipulative, and it almost makes you feel bad for his family. With all this info being shown, it's clear that Joseph is the most cruel out of the 3 we've discussed. He may not be as well liked as the previous villains, but he is definitely a very well written one at that. From his crazy motivations and actions to that energy and power that he emits that continues to linger in his followers, submitting to him and doing what he wants simply by asking. So I think it's been long enough, so let me explain why that definition is there at the beginning of the video. Each game symbolizes this word. You can also think of this word as a phrase, we won but at what cost? And this is arguably the single most defining phrase of Far Cry. In each of the Far Cry games, we win but lose something in the process. Jason Brody was a simple American kid at the beginning of the game, not knowing what to do in life, but as we progress we see him change and talking about how he finally found what he wants to do in his life and that it actually has purpose. This all culminates at the final decision. Each decision comes at a loss of something. If Jason allies with Citra, he has to kill his friends to be a true Rakyat warrior, only to be killed immediately after by Citra herself. As she says, Jason was born a warrior and he will die a warrior. That's the final part of her ritual, being killed, which would explain why Voss thinks Citra is crazy. Even if hypothetically he would have lived that stab wound, Jason would just live his life killing pirates and being a bloodlusting killer. And once the pirates are gone, what's left? The people of the island. If he chooses to leave the island, then it all was for nothing. Citra is dead, Dennis and presumably the Rakyat don't like us anymore, and while yes, he is alive and can return to America with his friends, what does he do now? There's no purpose in his life. He doesn't want to go back to the Jason Brody from the intro, but he also doesn't want it to come at the cost of his friends, so he's stuck with no way out. As we explained previously, Ajay's main goal and only goal was to spread his mom's ashes, once again saying that he's thankful for the Golden Path's help, but that's not why he's here. He was forced into this. He probably doesn't care for either Sabal or Amita or their civil war. He just wants to respect his mother's dying wish and leave, but he has to join them and make all these decisions for the leaders, which are both awful options. If Sabal becomes leader of the Golden Path, he makes Badra the Tarun Matara, which, while not exactly proven, it's possible this role has some sexual undertones to it, and seeing as Badra is 14, that's definitely not the greatest look for Sabal, especially since we can see him killing members of the Golden Path who allied with Amita, claiming that sins like these can only be washed away with blood. With Amita, she turns Kirat into a drug state. She orders the rebels to go into people's houses and take their kids from them so they can work in the fields. Each leader wants what they believe is best for the country, but in actuality they're both awful leaders with wild ideas and beliefs that are rooted in dishonesty. Even though Ajay most likely won't return to Kirat for quite some time and will probably just go back to living in America, he still has to deal with the ramifications of his journey, from the state he leaves his family home country in to the people that died by his hands, whether they deserved it or not. For the deputy, some could argue that we didn't even win. All the hard work of killing the Seed family and bringing back peace to the county is all for nothing as the collapse still happens. All the people we saved, the quests we did, the vehicles and weapons we all bought, it was a waste of time. Joseph was right, and he said in the intro, sometimes the best thing to do is nothing. The family needed to be stopped. They killed innocents who didn't join them and tortured people in the name of God. But it's because of these actions that caused us to deem Joseph as insane when he was correct the entire time and lots of people died for it. Although depending on your ending, you do get to live the collapse. From what I heard about Far Cry New Dawn, the deputy ends up actually getting brainwashed by the father, since the only thing they could do in the bunker was think. The deputy was constantly thinking about his actions, whether they were the right choice or not. He would eventually listen to Joseph's word and become part of his new family. Now he's the silent protector of New Eden, possibly known as the Judge, which is quite a sad turn of events for the deputy. In each of the games, we win. We kill or stop the bad guys, but each ending came at the cost of something relating to our protagonist, whether it's their friends or their sanity. This may be an overanalysis of the character, but the deputy at the end of the game is like us when we finish a Far Cry game, thinking for hours or days even. Did we make the right choice? Should I have chosen Sabal over Amita in my playthrough? Should Jason have killed his friends? It's never been about choosing the good or bad option in Far Cry. It's always been about choosing the lesser of two evils, as even though you may not know what's coming, like with Far Cry 5, it's a Far Cry game. These aren't happy fairy tales. They're just games that make us feel powerless yet invigorated in the beginning, only to make us feel hollow by the end of it. Far Cry is a series like no other, able to keep things consistent in mechanics and plot placement, but also able to switch up the narrative of each game, making it just as good as the previous entry. Whether it's giving the player a laugh, questioning their own decisions, or leaving them feeling empty, they all serve their purpose of entertaining the player and getting them to think about their narrative differently. Truly a masterpiece of a series. Thank you all for joining me today. Let me know what you think about the video in the comments down below. This took quite a bit of time to make, but I feel it was all worth it in the end. As always, like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new so you can watch more analysis videos on all your favorite games just like this one, and with that, take care and have a good day. Goodbye.